Good, thanks. It's great being here. I've only been up for 15 minutes and then I hear that in my voice. I apologize. Laying the people in the room next door to me who required me to take 2 sleeping pills at 3:30 in the morning to try to get back to sleep. Okay. Off and on, I've thought about the fact that our disposition to abide by rules and our abiding by rules is less seen than our disposition to go for particular outcomes and to recognize particular outcomes when they take place. My first thought when I got this topic was that what was really unseen was what relative to perceived factual situations or even perceived consequences, what was relatively unperceived compared to those things was rules and rule compliance and ways in which rule compliance might produce seen particular results. So I thought the paper would be primarily about the relative unseeness of rules and rules compliance. And it still is. It's not quite as much about that as I first thought. I thought I would go off and read much more of the literature about the Christina Bicchieri type literature. And I did read that, but I also thought I should start this topic by reading some of Hayek's more obscure essays on pretty much the same issues. And as I read those papers and thought about other things in Hayek, a somewhat different paper came to mind, and that's the paper that you've received. And it's a paper which I label Hayek's extensions of Bastiat's insight. And I carefully groom Bastiat's insight to be that when we are choosing actions or evaluating actions, certain things are unseen, and we do better by taking better account of those things that are unseen. But of course, it's going to turn out that there are different ways of taking better account of what is unseen. Bastiat's basic way of taking better account of what is unseen is to see it. Bastiat's resolution to overcome the unseenness of some things is essentially look more carefully, right? Make resolve to see what we otherwise wouldn't see. See has the connotations of acquiring additional perceptual information. And it occurred to me that Hayek's interesting twist on that, on a couple of levels, is the better way to account for the fact that things are unseen is to shift from a type of case-by-case assessment of actions to a type of rule-governed assessment of actions, a rule-governed method of determining how one will act or how one will not act. It's by transferring our decision to rules that we better take account of what is unseen than by engaging in the perhaps fruitless attempt to come to perceive what is originally not perceived. All this is tied up with Hayek's emphasis on ignorance. And if you read Hayek, he over and over again invokes the pervasiveness of human ignorance. You have to be a little bit careful about just what he means by ignorance. It's not, he doesn't mean something as broad and unavoidable as you might think when he says it's all ignorance. What he's talking about is our ignorance with respect to particular current facts and our ignorance with respect to what future particular facts will come about, what particular future facts will come about if we act now in some particular way. So it's an ignorance that's especially focused on our inability to know particulars rather than our inability to know abstract propositions. And Hayek even puts our ability to know broad empirical generalizations, not on the side of ignorance, but on the side of things that, that we are capable of having. So there is a type of ignorance, this ignorance of particular facts and of particular outcomes that will arise when we act on what we take to be our beliefs about particular facts. That ignorance is not something that we can deal with, as Bastiat thought, by remediating the ignorance, by making that ignorance go away. So we can't better account for what we don't initially see. By learning those things, we have to find a different strategy for accounting for what we do not see. And there are two arguments in Hayek for shifting to rule-based decision-making rather than case-by-case, dependent on having all the particular facts sorts of decision-making. And I want to just give you those two arguments, remind you of those two arguments, and those two arguments are what I call in the paper Hayek's extension of Bastiat's insight. So again, Bastiat's insight is construed as we've got to find some way to better take account of these things that are, at least initially, unseen in our decision-making. Hayek's extension is we best take account of these things that are initially unseen by shifting to a type of rule-governed decision-making, not by screwing on our glasses in some better way and better seeing the particular facts at hand. Okay, so one way of seeing the first of these arguments that Hayek makes, and when I was putting the paper together, one of the things that I was a little bit surprised about is how different the two arguments I'm about to mention are, both of which are in Hayek. The first argument is really central to the Constitution of Liberty. The second argument is really central to law, liberty, and legislation. So these are two, and I call these the first and the second phase of Hayek's extension. I was struck by how different these two arguments are. I think they're compatible with one another, but they're very different, and also struck by the fact that Hayek doesn't seem to notice. When he's making one of these arguments, he kind of thinks he's making the argument, whichever one he's making. I should also say that toward the latter part of the paper, I talk a little bit more about what I first thought I would be writing about, namely the relative unseenness of rules and the reason why it's often the case that when our actions are significantly guided by rules, in the sense that rules constrain the options we consider going for, we tend not to see those rules, and we tend not to see the results of the actions that are guided by rules in that way as having as one of their important sources just those rules. So I do come back to that topic a bit. So here are the two main arguments, and I think I've got about 6 or 7 minutes to do. The first one especially turns on the notion, Hayek's notion of ignorance. So the problem is not that we don't see, but could see what the shopkeeper would have done with the funds that he needs to use to buy a new pane of glass. The problem is not that we don't see what he would have done and solve it. And it's not that the solution to that problem is that we can then come to see what the shopkeeper would have done. The problem is that we don't know systematically what people would have done. We don't know how they would have used their resources in cases where they've been prevented from using their resources or using their resources in the way they would choose. In fact, I think it's Hayek's view that the more positive and interesting and surprising a person's use of resources would have been had they been allowed to use their resources as they chose, the less likely we ought to know what they would have done. And there's this passage in Hayek, lots of passages in Hayek, where he says the important thing about maintaining freedom, Hayek here is associating freedom with compliance with the rules that we're talking about. The important thing about freedom is that it brings about a situation in which people can act in ways that we don't know what they will be. We don't know what clever thing the shopkeeper would have done, instituted a new computer system rather than just buy another stool for his shop. So we lose, we know that we lose a lot, and maybe in particular cases we lose an enormous amount when somebody is prevented from using as they choose a particular resource, especially when they are prevented from using as they choose a resource that they themselves have gone out of their way to have, probably have more knowledge about the possible uses of those resources, probably have more knowledge about how they themselves could make use of that resource, probably have more knowledge than the outsider does about the circumstances that surround that resource and dictate in various ways what its possible uses are. When Hayek talks about ignorance, it sounds as though he's saying everybody is equally and profoundly ignorant with respect to particular facts. But what he's actually saying is there isn't a sort of collective knowledge about these facts. But typically, particular individuals have considerably more knowledge, empirical knowledge, about particular things than other individuals do. The reason we gain by allowing individuals to decide for themselves how particular objects and resources which are under their control will be used is that that system allows more knowledge to be brought to bear on decisions about the use of resources than a system that is collective, where the decisions about how those objects will be used depends upon some sort of joint knowledge. It's the joint knowledge that doesn't exist. So in any case, for Hayek, the first argument is that we can't say really what the results of interfering with the shopkeeper's window pane will be. We can't say very well what the good consequences of that would be. Maybe the greasier, the glass producer gets some more business, maybe not. But we especially can't say what the positive, we especially can't say what positive thing the owner of the pane would do had the pane not been broken. But we can say, he thinks, that on average, what would be done if the pane is not broken, what would be done if we prevent the lout from breaking the pane. On average, he says, there will be more gain from that than there is gain from allowing the lout to break the window. In fact, in the paper I say, so his argument is that the expected gain from not allowing the lout to break the window is greater than the expected gain from letting the lout break the window. And that's our reason for always preventing the lout from breaking the window, although in a particular case, it's possible that in reality, more will be gained by allowing the lout to break the window. Okay, very quickly. I got a zero. Oh, okay. Okay. That's the argument that dominates in Hayek's Constitution of Liberty. So there are some hints of the next argument. Okay. The next argument, what I call the second phase, is much closer to the standard and well-known Humean argument. Right? So the Humean argument, which Hayek also adopts, it's hardly necessary to even summarize it, but it's that the way what we have to talk about is not whether the gains or the expected gains associated with a particular action, whether the local expected gains associated with a particular action are greater or lesser if we allow interference or if we forbid interference. Rather, what we have to talk about are the systematic gains of requiring that the actions conform to the rules. Right? Standard Humean story about it's not so much the gain in the local case that makes us want to insist that the window not be broken, but we want to maintain the general expectation that that rule against breaking windows we want to maintain that general expectation. There are systemic effects of people generally expecting that their windows won't be broken. You can imagine what they are. They're enormously potent, according to Hayek and Hume. And because of that, there are huge losses, according to Hayek and Hume, when some particular instances of rule violation takes place, because this undermines the general expectation, is the general expectation that provides us with the great benefits. Striking thing here is that Hayek doesn't say this, but Hume does. It could very well be that we have great and reasonable confidence that in a particular case, there's more local gain from violating the rule than from abiding by the rule. But that doesn't matter, because in light of the systemic benefits of violating the rule should still not be violated. I want to bring in ignorance again here just to conclude. And I think the key part here for Hayek, a couple of places ignorance still is playing a role. One is Hayek's view that even in a society where people are firm abiders by these beneficial rules, they are almost all ignorant of. They almost all neither see nor understand why compliance with these rules have this general good. So it may very well be that it's not through any sort of knowledge that people abide by these rules, but despite their rational inquiries, they have just accepted these rules, and their general compliance with those rules and other people's expectations of the general compliance is what gives us the social gains.